Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever MSCB webinar, The Price of Success, Unlocking the Rewards of ISO Certifications. My name is Milma, and I'm the Marketing and Digital Content Specialist here at MSCB. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Whether you're a business owner or executive, auditor, quality manager, or professional, or eager to unveil the price of success with ISO management system certifications, you will leave this masterclass feeling incredibly confident about the importance of management system certification. And to make sure we're helping and informing you as best we can, submit any questions you have in the chat box below, and we will address them during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. In addition, please be informed that this session will be recorded and shared on the MSCB website later on. Today with us is Rinske Geerlings, the industry expert and ISO management system auditor, and I will let her get started with her presentation. Hi, Rinske.
Hi, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Good afternoon. I think a lot of you are in the time zone of the afternoon. I'm in the time zone of the evening, so good evening to those in my time zone. I'm based in Australia, so hope you have a great rest of the day, everyone. And hope this webinar will enlighten you a little bit. It's the first one from MSCB, and I look forward to participating as a presenter in this one. So let me use the slides a little bit as a guide to talk a little bit more about my background, and then we're going to delve into this topic about the rewards of ISO certifications. And it might help you as well to tell everyone around you, whether it's your clients or your employer, about the importance of ISO certification and how it can help. Because there's, of course, different views on certification, and we're going to touch on all of those and to see what's the balanced perspective there. So the agenda for today, the presentation, I'll go through a number of items, including some case studies, for example, because I think, yeah, we can talk in theory about ISO standards and about the importance of certification, but if we don't bring it to practice and actually see how other organizations are using this kind of path, the journey to certification, then it's not much use. You know, we need to actually really look at how it works and what are the benefits of it. And at the end, we have a Q&A session. Now, throughout the presentation, if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. There's, I don't think there's chat activated in this session, so better in the Q&A. And that's being monitored by the guys from MSCB. So they will have a look at if there's any questions that are similar or what we can highlight at the end of the presentation. So thanks for your active participation in here and for joining. And let's talk a little bit more about all those ISO standards. You see quite a few here that are in my profile. You see the ISO 27001, which is a very prominent one in the information security space. But also you see some other ones, and they may just look like a big brain dump, but they're all a little bit interrelated. So the ISO 22301 is business continuity. The ISO 22361 is crisis management, a brand new standard since last year. In case you're interested in learning more about that, it's a really good one to investigate. It's not a certifiable standard though, just like the ISO 223, the ISO 31000 is also not certifiable, but they're really good standards to use as guides for improving processes, management systems in organizations. So I mentioned the ISO 31000, that's the risk management standard, and as I mentioned, not certifiable. 22301 is, the 27001, of course, is certifiable as well. And then there's a few other ones that are related. The 22316, funny, the numbering is just swapped. That's organizational resilience. And that's also quite a popular one these days, especially when it comes to personal certification. I haven't seen it much in organizational certification yet, or in the path towards that, or the alignment with that standard. But I do see a lot of people interested in that standard for their own professional background. As you can see there, a few more bits of my history. You can see probably a few things around what I've been doing in the different sectors, the government, the SME space, so the small and medium enterprise. Sometimes that is actually a good segment to look at, because there's often no nominated people or dedicated people in the middle-sized, medium-sized organizations or the smaller ones that are actually focusing all day long on certain management systems. So there's often people who wear the hat of any of these management systems that we looked at before. And so it's a much more interesting space sometimes to actually really provide service and support. We all try to, as consultants, we always think, oh, we should chase the big end of town, and they're the bigger projects. But actually, that mid-sized segment is really important, because they're in much more need to also get help with getting their management systems up to speed, because there's simply sometimes no dedicated staff for those topics internally. So you can see a few awards and things like that, and some regulatory experience I have. In Australia, when you talk about certification and compliance, the finance sector has always been a bit of a leader when it comes to organizations like banks and insurance companies and other authorized deposit-taking institutions to actually have their processes up to speed, whether it's business continuity or cybersecurity or outsourcing or risk management. They are usually looked at with a much more of a spotlight on them by governments all over the world, actually. And so in Australia, we saw that since 2005, the banks have to comply with certain standards there, especially in the business continuity space. And I've got some experience actually liaising with those regulators as well to understand what is in their mind. And we see quite a lot of organizations using ISO certification to then be compliant with a whole range of other frameworks and standards, whether it's government requirements or whether it's specific industry requirements. Those who work in finance may have heard of SOC 2, for example. That's a whole different framework. But if you have, for example, ISO certification, then it becomes a lot easier to also comply with the SOC 2 requirements and also with some of those government requirements. So that's an actual side benefit of doing ISO certification as an organization, because it will much quicker get you on the way to also impress other people who might want you to have those certifications, or at least some good management systems and processes and procedures in place. You can see here a whole range of examples from my client space. So since 2006, I run a business called Business as Usual, and we've serviced 5 continents, and all the sectors you can see there. Some of you might recognize some, from government, from the emergency services space. You can see some banking clients in there, and also more in the hospitality or the space of just professional services, for example. All these sectors actually are getting more and more focused on good management systems. So that's just a bit of a snapshot there. And some are really almost ready to be completely compliant and certified, but sometimes don't recognize yet that it's such an important thing to have good management systems in place. I'm sort of highlighting a sector here, for example, the manufacturing and logistics and transport sector. In their processes, there's so much disruption and being on their feet with ready to go procedures to fix problems, that sometimes they actually don't see immediately the benefit of having good management systems in place, because they think, well, we just fix the problems as they come along, right? We do firefighting all day long, and you can see literally a group of firefighters in my client space. And it's sometimes hard to convert their mindset a little bit to say, hold on, if we don't write down what we do, if we don't make it actually auditable and certifiable, if you're not there, you might be the hero here, the person who knows everything. But if you're not here and the next person has to come into play, at least they have a guide to go by, right? And it doesn't rely on just a few individuals or a few single points of success. So yeah, they're just some things to keep in mind. I think as a few side comments about getting people's mind towards these processes. You often see people thinking, well, a standard, is that going to make or break my process? Because the more you do tick box type exercises, it gets less people really on the journey for the right reasons. It lets everyone focus on the auditors, and that's not what you want. So it's apart from just having a standard in your hand and going, yes, let's go and implement this, you need to also think about the people side. And that's in my world, the most important side to convert and to actually really spend time on. The technical side and the procedural side they're the more predictable parts, whereas the people side and getting them along on your journey is the less easy part, you know. So as an auditor or as a person who waves the flag for management systems and certification, you need to think about how to sell it as well. And some people find selling a dirty word, you know. It's like, oh, I don't want to be promoting that or self-promoting. But I think, yeah, with the right carrot and the right stick, sometimes the combination is really, really important. So I mentioned the carrot and the stick. The carrot is something that could be what's the real benefit of that management system and certification. And for example, commercial benefits fit in that corner, you know, where people go, oh, this helps me sell our services more easily because now we're certified and we can tap into bigger markets. Whereas the stick approach is purely like, oh, well, there's a government regulator coming and they will want us to have these procedures. That's not really what warms people up for the concept. Often it makes them more scared of doing things wrong. But is that really the vibe you want to give this, right? So it's always a bit of a juggling act, and it's quite fun to actually bring a little bit of a think tank or a team together to brainstorm some of these sentiments and to say what is actually yeah, how does the organization feel right now, and how can we really bring the right benefits to the table for them, because it always needs to be massaged and tailored a little bit. Every organization is different in size, in complexity, in style, in history, in industry, you know, and all those factors play a role in how you can get them to come on your journey for being a certified entity. Now, I mentioned quite a bit the skills of the person coming in, and why is that so important to be a well, it's actually what makes it interesting to be a certified auditor, and what is that life like? You know, what can you actually achieve by being a certified auditor? And so professional credibility, of course, you know, having certification behind you as a person, increased job opportunities, career advancements, networking and relationships, you know, for example, through the MSCCB, which is a group of auditors in essence. And yeah, having confidence in your work and continuing professional development and seeing a journey rather than just a one-off a job that you've learned and you don't have to do anything for. You know, in auditing, you'll always be learning more. And if you are one of those confident auditors that have learned a lot through the tracks, then it's also easier to convert the message to your organizations that you work in or that you might be consulting to. So having a group behind you, like this forum, for example, some of you in this forum, in this webinar, are actual auditors. Other people are more on the receiving end. They're thinking about certification. You know, you might work in an organization where you think, I need to know what this is all about before someone comes in and checks on me. So that's also maybe a reason why you're here. And all of those reasons, they may be, some of them at least, on this list that you see in front of you here. Now, let's start on the actual generic benefits of organizational certification. So if you're an organization, you're thinking about getting certified and getting at least your processes aligned with certain ISO standards, even if you're not even ready to get certified, it might actually be already useful to grab one of those standards and to start looking at, with a bit of a self-assessment or with a guided assessment by an external person, to actually look at how would we do if someone came here to audit us on this process. You know? So even if that brings some energy in the process to start doing things a bit better, a bit differently, a bit more organized, a bit more predictable and repeatable. If that actually helps for certain processes, you know, you might be thinking of business continuity or information security, but maybe you're in the food sector, for example, you might be looking at other standards there, or environmental standards like, you know, ISO 45001, for example. There may be a whole range of other standards that you're looking at. And before even getting towards certification, looking at those standards, finding some real life examples, picking a few sections out of them and to see how can we actually use this for making our business a bit better. You may actually be on a better journey that way, to first see the benefits and then start going serious with it, you know, and getting auditable kind of processes in place. So a couple of generic benefits I wanted to highlight today is improved quality and efficiency. Just like I said, you might have actually a bit of an uplift of how you're doing business right now, your internal processes. It could be actually also your external processes. And therefore, as a benefit, you might find improved product or service quality. you might find that internally there's less errors and increased operational efficiency. And less errors could also mean less rework or less complaints from customers, for example. So whilst these ISO standards have always a bit of a flavor or the incorrect assumption of people thinking it's an internal thing, immediately you should really start looking at what are the externally promotable benefits, you know? So that's the first benefit. Now, another benefit I see in across all sectors actually is enhanced credibility. So having on your website, for example, the fact that you're a certified organization, you have some ISO standards behind you, you maintain those. It's not an ISO standard that you implemented 20 years ago. No, it's actually something that you've maintained, that you're being surveyed on every year, and that you do recertification on. And so you're maintaining that that standard, that accreditation actively. That's important, you know. And so meeting internationally recognized standards for quality or safety or environmental management, I've just highlighted a couple there. Or it enhances also the organization's reputation and credibility in the eyes of customers, partners, and stakeholders, including staff. Now, that's a little bit of a cheeky comment there, but just have a think about this. If you ask any colleagues or any people that you know work in organizations, and you ask them what is your biggest problem right now, what is the biggest rock in your shoe, what is the biggest rock on your road right now. I do this all the time because I meet lots of people on my journey, right? And lots of different organizations in different continents and countries, and invariably everybody says getting the right people, keeping them trained, and making sure they don't leave. That seems to be the common theme across all sectors, organization size, everywhere. You know, and you might be in one country where you go, oh, for us, it's not a problem. It's actually hard to find a job. But I find in about 90% of the questions that I ask, the answer is like that. It's like, well, actually finding people, and especially good people who want to keep learning. A lot of processes these days you have to keep learning, like information security. You can't really learn in university how to do it and then really manage the process without enhancing your own knowledge. So it's hard to find staff in there. Now, coming back to these ISO standards and certification, if you're a staff member and you can pick and choose where you want to work, which is what the market seems to be like a little bit, right? Or you may be a manager looking for staff who fit your organization. Do you think it might be of interest to a certain degree that if you promote the right benefits of ISO standards and certification, that staff member or potential staff member might think, hey, I want to work in that organization? Because if they've got their processes worked out, if it's pat down, if it's streamlined, if they have good things documented, if I can actually go home when the time is the end of the day at 5 o'clock without knowing, you know, with knowing that the place won't fall over without me, you know, if everything is kind of streamlined, that is actually a real good benefit of starting to work in an organization and having some confidence that you're not going to be carrying, you know, the fort all on your own. So I think that's becoming a bit of a selling point, you know. And I've heard this before where staff who start in an organization, they say, what a mess this place is. I don't have any idea what I'm doing. You know, I'm doing things, and sometimes they're risky things, but nobody's telling me that it's not, that I shouldn't be doing it. I sometimes have to work it out on my own. That's not a good feeling. So ISO standards and qualifications and certifications actually help people be more confident in what the organization is all about and how they go about their business. So just think along that line a little bit, and by all means in the Q&A, or you know, if you have just a comment, it's fine as well. If you don't have a question, but you just want to share something, it's not a problem at all to just put a note in there to say, yeah, I'd like to hear some further stories on this, or can we see some industry examples or something? Because we're always interested to hear what lives in your world, you know. And if there's other webinars that we can also put together for this, when I mentioned some of those topics and issues in organizations, please highlight those to us, because it's important to us and the team at MSCCB. Another benefit there is expanding into new markets. So opening to new markets and business opportunities, being able to deal with certain new customers or new partners or new suppliers. Sometimes you need to show certification and compliance yourself. It's often a prerequisite these days for doing business, especially when you're talking about workplace health and safety, environmental management. There's a whole checklist these days if you want to do business with government or a financial institution. If you're a medium-sized organization or a smaller size organization, even then you have to show that you've got good processes in place. Otherwise, you can't even tender for the work, you know, you can't even send a proposal. So it's giving a competitive edge when bidding for contracts. And also, ISO, the beauty of that is it's international. So whilst I have quite a few clients that are actually saying, oh, we just stick with the British standard, or we just stick with the American standard, or we just stick with the Australian standard for this, I always ask them and say, do you have international operations already? Or are you planning to expand internationally? Because then you might want to actually consider ISO certification, because it actually will give you the leadway into those international markets. An organization at the other side of the planet who wants to buy your products and who will survey you as an organization, they may have no clue at all what is your local certification all about, you know, your accreditation you have in your local market. But if it's an ISO certification, they will probably tune on a little bit quicker and go, oh yeah, ISO, we know about that. We're certified ourselves in that, you know, or we have other certifications in the same space. So it's a good one for thinking about expansion. So if you're an internal staff member who wants to introduce these concepts of ISO certification into your organization, or if you're a consultant, for example, have a think about using some of these benefits. And there's a few more. This one is important as well, the regulatory and legislative compliance. So aligning processes with legal and regulatory requirements, ensuring compliance with applicable laws and regulations and industry-specific guidelines, and reduced risk of penalties, fines, and other legal issues. Now, if you've got this is beyond just the government and other legislative space. I'm talking about contractual requirements. If you have an obligation to a customer to deliver a certain service, or to a partner organization who together in the same supply chain, for example, work towards servicing a group of customers, there may be some obligations you've got there. And if you break them, if you don't comply with them, you may be at risk of penalties and fines and other legal issues. So that's a very direct benefit of having that compliance, because it will actually prevent certain things. If you've got good management systems in place, there's less chance of erratic, unknown behaviors. There's going to be a better chance of having things documented and tracked properly. So yeah, it will give you that benefit. Happier customers. Now, that's, of course, an important one as well. Enhanced understanding of customer needs and improved communication about what you're actually doing and what you're all about as a business. Your ISO certification can be shown on your website, for example, as one of the key principles behind how you do your business. Delivery of products or services that consistently meet or exceed expectations. Now, that's a big promise, of course, you know, and that's maybe not always the case, but it is certainly one of the benefits there that you want to emphasize, that it's really about continual improvement. All the ISO standards really have that as a concept. And they all have as a concept good communication, and not just one person writing a management system procedure process in some little office and not sharing it, you know. In the ISO space, it's all about making sure that ISO standards are embedded into different business processes, different parts of the organization, not just into the office of the quality manager, you know. So it's important that way. And they all have the continual improvement as a foundation really for their approach. Increased customer satisfaction and loyalty. And so if you know that an organization is with you, if they know you're certifying yourself every year, you're also making sure that you're there for the long run, that actually gives that benefit as well. Then proactive risk management. If things go wrong, a lot of the ISO standards have this risk-based approach behind them, and they emphasize being proactive with risk management. So not waiting for a disaster to strike, not waiting for things to slip, not waiting for a risk to become a real event, and then suddenly becoming, oh yeah, what is the process here? In the ISO world, we actually really emphasize being proactive and seeing the key risk indicators, you know, the symptoms before a risk actually becomes an event, so that you can still stop it and have good mitigations in place. And so you can see that protecting reputation and assets is one of those key benefits of all of that. Now, continuous improvement culture. I mentioned that it's part of the ISO world, but the culture is, of course, the people that need to adopt it. And the mindset of ongoing learning, innovation, and adaptability, resulting in long-term success, is sometimes also something you can really sell externally as a benefit to potential staff members. Like I mentioned, earlier, it can be a real benefit for recruiting new people and to make sure they understand that, hey, if they come and work for you, it's a world of ongoing learning and adopting new practices and sharing and think tanking things, you know, it's that's part of the way that ISO works. So it also helps with that as a benefit. Now, all of these benefits, of course, come with a price, like everything in life. If you think you're getting something, you're gaining something, there's usually something that is challenging at the same time. That's the whole idea, right? So if you actually really embrace the concept of ISO standards and certification, be prepared that it's not going to come for free. You know, and if it seems to be coming for free because someone just goes rubber stamps the organization, says, oh, this looks good enough, you might have to put some red flags on, you know, and thinking, well, how is that? And why is that? Is that really a good auditor that we've got here? Because they haven't seen this and this and this. I know that it's tempting to think, oh, thank goodness they didn't find this, but in the long run, it's going to come out. And you really want to use the influence and the input from the auditor to bring to the table certain issues and certain non-conformities before you actually go on the path of being seriously every year subject to surveillance audits to actually maintain that process. You know, you want to make sure you do it right from the start. So yeah, it's a good thing to find those things early, and the warts and all should be really coming up before you even go near certification, so you can still remediate those issues. So the cost in a more tangible way in terms of actually making your organization be a certified organization and compliant with these standards, the size and complexity of your organization really play a big role. If you've got lots of different geographical sites, if you've got different offices, if you've got different skill sets in your organization, different products, different services, different business units, different levels of those mergers, acquisitions, the more complex it is, the harder it can be sometimes to quickly implement a management system. So I already mentioned it's all about people, right? People can't change that fast. They're human beings, right? They're going to go, well, hold on, I've done this for the last 40 years like this. What are you going to tell me? So be prepared to sometimes meet some of that resistance and keep focusing on those 7 benefits I just mentioned and to translate that into their world. So if I talk to an operations manager, for example, that might be a different story. That sales pitch for the process may be different from when I talk to a salesperson or a legal representative of the team, you know, of the organization. For all of them, there are different triggers, different real tangible benefits of ISO management systems and certification. And so if you really care about people, if you really care about what motivates them and what inspires them, you translate that for them and with them. And don't just hammer people with a list of requirements, do this because we need to get certified and the auditors are coming. Actually really translate that message to their world. And that will give you a lot better relationships and also a more better longevity in the process. Maturity level of existing processes pre-certification. So that's really, what have you got now? Are you starting from scratch or are you starting with processes that are fairly well embedded already? Now, just one small word of warning, maybe sounds a bit contradictory, but existing processes, if they're not quite correct and not quite aligned with the ISO standard, can be actually a real burden. I've worked in regions, geographical regions, where we had to start with nothing. There was just no process whatsoever, nothing written down, no repeatable process. And the implementation of some of these management systems was much easier. And for the organization to achieve certification was actually much more straightforward because they didn't have any backlog. They didn't have any, how shall I say, no resistance to change. There was just nothing. And we went on the journey to implement, you know. And then when the auditors came in, they were like, well, this is actually, there seems to be no conflicting procedures, for example, no version clashes, none of that. No, because we started from scratch. So whilst this second bullet point seems like a benefit, you know, if there is existing processes, the level of maturity is really important there, and if that is actually well implemented or not. The type of ISO standard that is being pursued, some are really a lot more intensive in terms of time and effort and money than some of the other ones. So I mentioned the 22301 for business continuity. I mentioned the ISO 27001 for information security. All of those have different levels of intensity, I think. And the next bullet sort of links with that. If you can implement in conjunction that can give certain benefits. I'm just going to highlight especially the implementation part, not so much the auditing part. I'm talking about the actual implementation of the management system. If you do things in parallel, you may be in a good position to get some real efficiencies and leadway with especially middle management in that organization. I'm just highlighting an example here. For example, the business continuity workshops you might run, and you might have business units in those workshops asking them about critical processes and key risks. Similar questions you would ask if you implement something like ISO 27001. So whilst you've got people in the room, maybe you can ask them a number of similar questions, do it all in the same session, in the same workshop, and you've now ticked multiple boxes. I wanted to say something like kill the birds with one stone, but in a positive way. I don't like killing birds at all. But you know what I'm saying? It's like in one workshop, you might actually, in that 2-hour session or 90-minute session, have all those managers there, the middle management and their staff, and ask them a number of questions that will tick the boxes for the ISO 22301, as well as for the 27001, etc. Sometimes the ISO 31000 as well, because the risk management principles also work behind those, or behind many standards. So that might be a real benefit as well. And the other price tag also depends on which certification body you've chosen. So whether it's MSCCB or another one, they all have different price tags. And sometimes that depends on how their team is built. If they're global or not, will your certification be recognized globally? Is it a well-established organization? Are they aligned with certain bodies, behind them? Are they aligned with certain good governance principles? So you may want to do some good due diligence in that regard, and know if they and ensure that they've got good continuity also of the auditors, so that if you do need your surveillance audit, that there is someone available, because that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. So that's the couple of thoughts on the price of success in there. All right. Let's have a look at some of these other price tags, the considerations that you'd have: internal resourcing and upskilling. When you're actually implementing a process, you need to think about, what about your own internal staff? They need to be potentially going to maybe some training courses or things like that. They need to understand how actually to read an audit report properly. They need to understand how to improve the process, to remediate some of the gaps. So it's not just about an external party coming in, it's also about your internal team being actually really on top of things and almost ready for the audit any day, because they're maintaining the processes so well. So these are some of the cost factors there: registration fees, of course, and the time investment for employees to attend those sessions as well. Implementation costs and efforts. Yeah, well, of course, making a management system part of your ongoing business, it doesn't come overnight. You might have to change some of those existing processes across your whole organization. It could be every department having to tweak some things. Investments in technology, equipment, infrastructure, etc., to support the process. You might need certain document management systems in place. Especially, I see that with the ISO 27001. If an auditor sees that you've got things pat down with good version control, you can have it all accessible in a quick way without too much digging and too much, reverting to old versions and that sort of thing. If you have it all organized, it gets a lot easier. So some organizations are looking at that. Sometimes they use some commonly available tools like, a SharePoint or something that is already in their own space available without any cost, but you still have to make sure it's populated and it's utilized. Then consultancy, it's not always needed, but there's quite a few organizations that I know of that really, if they didn't have a consultant helping them with this kind of work, it would either take way too long for them to get there. It would be for them to actually understand the content of each of the management systems would just be undoable from scratch. They want a person externally hand holding them and guiding them through that process. So that's also maybe a cost to that. And like I said, it's not mandatory, of course, but it's sometimes a good thing that organizations choose to do. The fees of the certification body. Think about the initial certification, but also the surveillance audits and the recertification audits. Often we find the first one, people focus on that. And of course, that is a big effort usually to get the first one done. But then year 2 and year 3, their surveillance audits, yeah, they're usually about, I guess, roughly about a third in terms of the intensity. But then recertification bumps up again in terms of how much work is done in that 4th year to get recertified, because in a 3-year period, often, well, there's things that have changed in that business, you know, systems or people or organizational structures or things like that. And it takes an auditor a bit of time, of course, to get up to speed with all of that. And that's why there's of course, a fee to that. Now, another price of success is that there's no long-term commitment sometimes. And that is, I put that as a cost factor there, because if it's just done as a tick box approach, all this auditing, certification, you're really wasting effort and money. You know, if you think it's just, oh, we've got a big client coming on, let's quickly get certified in this ISO standard. I hope I'm resonating with a few people here in the room, because I know that that's often the sentiment, you know, there's a big opportunity for a tender or something. Really think about how you make this part of your journey and properly embed it, because these are the effort is too big and too important to do it half-baked and to make it look good whilst it's not actually what you really have there. So yeah, so make sure that it's that there's a bit of a longer term roadmap that you build for this, and to see how it's going to be maintained and supported all the way along. So I mentioned case studies. You know, it's important to think, what is the realistic picture here? Which organizations actually have done this? So I thought I'll pick 3 different ones from different sectors. Now, here is the first example. This is an electronic contract manufacturing company. So an assembly company, they do manufacturing, a lot of technology behind them, R&D, research, development, and so on. Big journey for them to actually choose to get certified. And you can see here the sort of manufacturing processes they have, you know, inspection, SMT assembly processes, first article inspections, in-process inspection. A lot of quality management goes on in this organization, automated optical inspections, final inspection. You can see how much checking is already embedded in their own process. And this was actually partially in place before they even thought about certification, because this is just the nature of their business. There's a lot of parts, a lot of components that have to fit well, and they're under quality checks. You know, they have to be done properly. So it's in their DNA already before they went towards certification. And you can see here some of their products and service examples that they've got. Now, milestones for that organization, you can see the whole journey from 1995 all the way to 2018. This is just a number of examples of what they call their own milestones, right? So you can see here, they got ISO 9001-2000 certified in the year 2000. So in some ways that was actually quite adventurous, because they did straight away the 2000 version. Okay, and that came out in that year. They adopted it, and they went with that. So that's the orange examples in here of some of the highlights in their journey. You can see they upgraded their operation to ISO 9001-2008 in 2008. So they're staying in tune also very well with what the requirements of the standards are and the new versions that come out. Similar challenges we actually see with the ISO 27001 at the moment, because there's just a standard upgrade, a version change that came out last year. And a lot of organizations are running a little bit behind the facts, unfortunately, to try and quickly adopt those new controls and clauses. So this organization did the same thing. They went with that alignment. And you can see here the Institute of Printed Circuits, and also another certification in their industry. The blue ones are industry certifications that they adopted. They basically had to do that because they had to do business with clients and other partners in their industry. So 4 different bits of certification related activity. And then you can see where things started paying off. Now, I'm not saying that before that they didn't get valued as a supplier, but they really started that continuity, that consistency, when you see in how it came back. And that is in the awards that they are starting to win. So in 2016, 17, 18, and 19, you can see them actually continuously attracting industry awards, where they're being seen as the environment management systems, and they're actually certifying themselves in that one. So they upgraded in that one. Actually, the 2017 activity should actually be one of the orange one as well, because that's not just where they were recognized for it, but they actually implemented a whole new management system there. And then you could see that in the Small Business Excellence Awards, Hall of Fame, that they also got some of those awards. So they did a great job with that whole journey. And the specific benefits I wanted to highlight, these slides, they're being shared also afterwards in this webinar as well. So there's quite a lot of content here. I'm not going to run through all the detail of it, but I just thought I'll add the detail because you can take it away at the end and you can review that if you like. But of course, specifically in the manufacturing sector, you see things like employee engagement and safety. Safety is a big driver in that sector. So that really helped. The ISO standards really helped with maintaining that confidence of employees that it's a safe place to work, improved quality. You can see that in terms of their products, and enhanced operational efficiency, especially in manufacturing. Those things are very, very important. You see workflows, efficient workflows, and also resource management, reducing waste, for example. There are specific manufacturing sector benefits of having ISO standards. And you can see a few more on the supply chain optimization and compliance with regulatory requirements. Now, of course, supply chain, a very common one in the manufacturing sector, whilst actually in the digital world, you also have supply chains, but in their industry, that dependency on global supply chains is very common one. And increased market access and global competitiveness. I put in there, it's a specific one to their sector as well, because global competitiveness, when we're starting to import and export products, that's what in their sector is also a big driver for being certified. All right, second example, that is in the finance sector. And you can see there's a case study from a bank here in India, the Union Bank, and they're really also proud of what they stand for and what their governance processes are and what they can show the world in terms of their certifications. So they adopted the ISO 9001-2015 standard, and they got certified in 2015 for that. And you can see that was the standardization of credit appraisal through centralized processing center. So that's a specific area for them. And then you can see them also getting ISO 30414. Now that's an international standard for human capital reporting, a very common one becoming more common in the ESG world, the environmental, social, and governance world. That human capital reporting in the social context of ESG is becoming quite important, and you see that that's that standard that is highlighted here. So that bank adopted that one. And you can see here a few other standards that they adopted. So that's their certifications that they received there include also the 27001, also the 22301, and the 31000. Now, that third one, officially, that is not a certifiable standard. It's actually incorrectly placed on their website, but I give them a little bit of leadway. The marketing person who put certified, it's there, but it's actually, it's probably done by an external party that says, you know, this organization is working according to the principles of risk management under 31000. So I give them the benefit of the doubt with that one. It also highlights, though, that false marketing is not a good thing. If you're actually certifying, for example, only a very small part of your organization, you can't put on your website that you're fully certified, right? You need to always specify, just like on the certificate itself, it will have the scope highlighting which part of your organization and which geographical area was actually part of that certification process. So just be a little bit careful. I know it's attractive, you know, to use this as a marketing tool, but I highlighted this example because I spotted it. I was like, don't know if that's actually fully the truth. And I'm not picking on the bank, you know, on the particular Union Bank of India, because I know they're doing quite a good thing with all their standards and processes. So it's just, like I said, a little bit of misalignment, I think. And I will actually email them and say, look, it's better to remove this because, you know, it's false marketing otherwise. And I'm sure they'll come back to me completely unknowingly having done this. And that's what I would hopefully encounter there. All right, now you see some awards that they won. I mentioned that they did quite a lot of work in this space. They got certified. The awards they won, you can see a whole list of them. And you can see that the best technology bank, IT risk management, technology talent. On the right-hand side there, you can see quite a lot of things that have direct relationship with those standards that they got certified in. So I would probably suspect that that was actually the reason why those awards came to them, because they actually have, really, you can see here highlighted the ones that are have relevance to their certifications, like ISO 27001, for example. You can see how many of these awards would have potentially have a relationship with that. And here's some further examples like cloud technology, cloud adoption. Those things are also getting much more integrated there. All right, a couple of benefits there: regulatory compliance, of course, business continuity and disaster recovery, competitive advantage, especially for banks. I mean, the competitive threat is always a very big one. And you can see there the enhanced risk management. And customer trust and confidence are always important with banking as well. So they're just some specific examples of certification benefits for banks. Improved operational efficiency can also be important for banks that have lots of offices and branches, and that's important for that bank as well. And continuous improvement and innovation. Last example, that's a short one, but that's the healthcare example. If you're working in that sector, you can see a case study of that. And these things might help you as well internally sell the concept of certification, right? So yeah, you see there the healthcare sector player, Econ in Singapore, awards and accolades that they won. And you can see their achievements, you know, that they got ISO 9001, 2000 certified as well. So it's all a little bit, all the organizations you find that have certification, they typically have lots of awards and accolades as well. And again, those specific benefits for that sector: patient safety, quality of care is an important one in that sector, patient satisfaction and trust, and of course, regulatory compliance, improved operational efficiency. And the last ones are interoperability and collaboration, especially in the healthcare sector. You see that quite a lot is happening there with health information sharing, for example, between different organizations, effective risk and emergency management, and continuous learning and improvement. Yeah, so this content you can take away and look at in more detail if you need to. And I did it for those specific sectors, so you can always look them up if you're working in any of those specifically. Final comment, actually a question for all of you before we go to the Q&A, a question for all of you is: why does a car have brakes? Why does a car have brakes? I have a think in your head, what would be your answer? Why does a car have brakes? Now, if you're thinking about answers like to stop the car, to slow the car down, to control the car, to prevent bad things, accidents, you know, they may be important to you, but a business owner, a CEO, an innovator, a marketing person, they don't think that way. And they don't like slowing down. They don't like stopping. So my answer when someone says, why does a car have brakes, is so you can drive faster. And you may have heard this before or not, but it's a really, really good example of how you can sell internally to people that good controls, management systems, certification, it seems like it slows down things because it puts controls around everything, but it actually makes you confident that you've got the foundation as a business to grow and to innovate without feeling like, wow, how long can this go? Okay, will this stay safe forever? You know, because we're selling so much and we're innovating that we may be on a bit of a path of no return. And if we're over promising things to customers, for example, we need the tools behind us, the systems and processes to keep our promises, no? So yeah, that's my final slide there. So oops, be an ambassador and a teacher is my final word there, and of course Q&A then. So are there any questions in that Q&A? Let me have a little look, and I also wanted to hand over to Myanmar and the team there to see if you want to highlight any particular ones.
Yeah, thank you, Rinske. It was a very insightful presentation. Now it is time to answer some of the questions that we received. The first one says, what is the difference between being ISO certified and being in compliance with an ISO management system?
Right. Yeah, look, I would actually call it in accordance with. Working in accordance with is a better wording than being compliant with, because compliant seems 100% black on white, rubber stamped kind of approach, right? Whereas that's more like certification. So I use the word certification, which means the full-blown, auditable, rubber stamped, you know, fully certified. And then I use, we work in accordance with this particular standard. That's a more honest answer, I think. So compliance is leaving it a little bit in limbo, and I think it's better to be clear. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. The second one says, I have colleagues who do not really care about documentation. What should I do as a coworker?
Organize an event where they're having to jump into someone else's role as a backup person and have no idea where to start. And suddenly they see, wow, I wish I had some documentation here, some checklists or things like that. That would be a bit of a naughty approach, right? To create an event like that. But look, I think in the end, proper procedures and documented processes, and at least starting with checklists, something short form, that's okay. You know, I wouldn't encourage people to build monsters anyway. No standard tells you that things have to be the size of a monster. They just say you have to cover all the important parts, and it has to be repeatable, and you know, another person should be able to pick this up and use it. So that doesn't necessarily imply that it's going to be huge. But I would start with with coworkers who don't want to document their things and ask the question, what if you get hit by the bus tomorrow, or if you're sick tomorrow and someone else has to pick up the pieces, you know? And the other way around, it's a two-way street. It's a fair exchange that if other people are documenting their things, making life easy for people stepping into their role from time to time, it's also a fair thing that you do the same, right? So if you're here working together as part of the big family of the organization, then we should all go and do the same thing to a certain degree, at least, you know. So maybe that's some ways you can do that. Yeah, interesting question though. I've seen it before.
Yeah, thank you.
Sometimes, sorry, let me add one thing. If you suspect
Okay.
the reason is that that person is trying to maintain their little island of knowledge without sharing anything and without documenting anything, I would make that with a bit of humor, maybe a confronting question, and to say, is that the real reason you're trying to stay really important and having everything in your own head, you know? And yeah, you need to have maybe a bit of flair to ask that question, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. The next one is, are there any misconceptions about ISO management system certification that you would like to address?
I think some of the costs that I highlighted earlier in the presentation, you know, I think people underestimate the price of getting to success. And the price doesn't have to be the money side of it. The price is also the price you pay in terms of effort. The misconception, I think, is sometimes that it's a one tick box kind of thing. Oh, we do it once and then we're set up for the future. I think management systems always have to be tweaked, always have to be monitored internally, and to say, hey, how can we optimize? Continual improvement is often forgotten, you know, the fact that it's actually a core element of ISO standards. It's a section in all of them, you know, to say you can't just set and forget. And that's often, I think, a bit of a misconception that people think it's just a quick fix for a commercial problem we have or something, or a compliance problem we have with the government. Let's just quickly implement and get certified. But yeah, that's not the right way to go about it. So that might be one of those examples.
Okay, so just one more question. Due to our time limitation, we will be answering the other questions via email and include also the same ones on our website together with the recorded webinar. Can ISO certification help me save money in the long run? It is kind of related with what you already said.
Yeah, look, especially in those sector examples that I have, like more operational efficiency, of course, that's an immediate benefit in terms of cost. But also on the flip side, if you have a commercial benefit, if you're now losing work, you're losing opportunities out there because you don't have that certification, that can, of course, you know, be turned around by perhaps having a certification in place. Yeah. So I've covered, I think, quite a few of those examples. Yeah.
Okay. So if you have anything else to add before we leave, any advice or something?
Yeah, I've just been looking some of the questions here. The ones that are actual questions, please let me know via email or something what I can do there. You can always contact me on LinkedIn as well, or you can go through MCCB and they can connect you up with me if you have any particular questions or challenges. And hopefully we meet in real life at some stage. There may be an MSCCB event someday in real life. I'm not sure, you know, that would be great. So thanks for your attention, everyone. And thanks to MCCB for hosting.
Thank you, Rinske, for this presentation. Check out our MSCB LinkedIn and Facebook accounts to get informed about our audit and certification services, and stay tuned for our next webinar and other events. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.